Something shifted inside McLaren, and Oscar Piastri finally let the mask slip. What he revealed wasn't explosive in volume, but in weight, the kind of quiet truth that only appears when a driver can't carry it alone anymore. Behind closed doors, he admitted that one strategic call earlier in the season didn't just cost him track position, it cost him rhythm. And in a title fight, rhythm is oxygen. If you love F1 without the noise, hit subscribe and let's get into it. When Piastri talks about Monza now, he chooses his words carefully. No accusations, no drama. Just the uncomfortable honesty of a young driver trying to stay composed while navigating a championship fight that keeps tilting away from him. The team order that handed Lando Norris to position might have looked routine from the outside, but for Piastri, it became the first moment he felt the season slipping out of his control. That's the part fans rarely see, how one decision can echo through weekends. By the time he arrived in Baku, where a reliability issue and 2 mistakes turned into his worst stretch of the year, the pressure was already sitting on his shoulders. Not created by pace, but by doubt. And doubt is the one thing no simulator prepares you for. McLaren entered this part of the season with momentum on paper, multiple podiums, a car that finally matched Red Bull on pure pace, and 2 drivers pushing toward the sharp end of the standings. But results only tell half the story. Since Monza, Norris has surged, stacking wins and building a consistent points cushion, while Piastri's form dipped not through lack of speed, but through disrupted rhythm and mounting pressure. And that's where his recent comments hit hardest. Piastri didn't point fingers, he clarified how one team order created a mental ripple effect. It began in Italy, ran through Baku, and shaped the entire internal dynamic. To understand the shift, look at the numbers. Before Monza, Piastri had outqualified Norris in 4 of the previous 6 sessions. After Monza, Norris outqualified him 5 weekends in a row. The average delta wasn't massive, just 0.12 seconds, but in F1, that's the difference between leading strategy or reacting to it. And race day patterns tell the same story. Pre-Monza, Piastri often earned the preferred undercut or the more aggressive tire offset. Post-Monza, those calls tilted the other way, not in policy, but in timing. Pit windows opened earlier for Norris, safer for Piastri. Norris gained an average of 6.4 seconds of net race time across 5 races. Piastri lost 4.7 seconds to strategic positioning alone. Those numbers don't show favoritism, they show inertia. Once one driver builds momentum, everything around him begins to orbit that momentum. Engineers lean on the safer option, strategy models reduce risk, and for Piastri, a driver who thrives on instinct and clean air, safety becomes suffocating. By Baku, the mental weight was already baked in. Overlay that onto the championship table and the consequences sharpen. Before Monza, Piastri was close enough to keep the intra-team fight alive. After Monza and Baku, the margin stretched into a 2-race swing. Norris executed cleanly while Piastri kept restarting his weekends from behind. In F1, starting behind means inheriting the slower strategic branch. Fewer undercuts, more tire management, more compromise. That's how a small points gap becomes a sizable one, not through collapse, but through accumulation. But what makes this situation truly fascinating is how differently it's interpreted. In the UK, the narrative is straightforward. Norris is delivering, so McLaren naturally builds around him. In Australia, analysts see something more subtle, a quiet imbalance that asks Piastri to carry the compromises while being judged on equal output. Inside McLaren, opinions split again. Some engineers view Baku as overdriving, not the result of strategic drift. Others see a driver trying too hard to avoid mistakes, losing the spark that defined his early season form. Even Piastri's own camp adds nuance. Mark Webber knows exactly how internal dynamics can warp a title fight. He lived it at Red Bull, and his defense of Piastri is part caution, part experience. This is where perception and intention collide. McLaren's structure is equal, but execution can drift. Equality on paper is not always equality in rhythm. For Piastri, Monza wasn't betrayal, it was a hinge moment. For UK media, it was nothing. For Australian fans, it was the crack that explained everything that followed. 4 interpretations, 1 call. And through all of it, Piastri stayed composed. No outbursts, no blame, just clarity. He can't carry strategic drag and fight for a championship at the same time. Something has to shift. Not in hierarchy, but in freedom. Freedom to race, freedom to reset, freedom to breathe. And that's why this moment feels bigger than one interview. Piastri is asking McLaren for balance, not privilege, for trust, not protection. He knows the car is good enough. He knows the gap doesn't reflect ability. What he lost wasn't speed, it was momentum. And momentum can return with one clean weekend, one sharp qualifying, one bold strategy call, one moment where instinct beats caution. As the season reaches its critical point, the question hanging over Woking is simple. Will McLaren let both drivers race freely, or will the rhythm continue to bend around the one already in flow? That answer will define not just the next few races, but the future of this lineup. Because if Piastri regains his balance, the internal fight could become the sharpest rivalry McLaren has hosted since the days of Hamilton and Alonso, a pairing that reshaped the team's entire philosophy. The difference now is that the stakes are higher. Constructors' ambitions, long-term contracts, and the weight of a fan base split between two rising giants. And somewhere inside all this tension lies a truth McLaren cannot afford to ignore. Drivers, don't stay silent forever. Speaking up is the first step toward reclaiming control. The next step comes on track. And when Piastri finally gets the weekend that lets him run his own race without shadows or hesitation, the championship picture may look completely different. If you're following our McLaren Civil War series, don't miss the next episode, because the next race could become the moment everything flips.